Today, Clifford's Tower rises above the centre of York as one of Yorkshire's most recognisable historic landmarks. Its pale stone walls stand on a steep green mound surrounded by modern streets, shops and visitors. But the peaceful ruin we see today is only the last surviving fragment of a much larger fortress, York Castle. For almost 1,000 years, this site witnessed conquest, rebellion, persecution, royal power, imprisonment, war, fire and destruction. To understand its story, we must return to the year 1068, only 2 years after William the Conqueror defeated King Harold at the Battle of Hastings. Although William had become King of England, his control over the north remained uncertain. York was one of the most important cities in the kingdom, with Roman foundations, Viking traditions, and a population unwilling to accept Norman rule without resistance. William marched north with his army and ordered the construction of a castle beside the River Foss. The location was carefully selected. From here, Norman soldiers could control river traffic, watch the surrounding roads, and dominate the city. The first York Castle was not the enormous stone fortress many people imagine. It was constructed rapidly from timber and earth. Labourers dug a deep defensive ditch and piled the excavated soil into a high artificial mound known as a motte. A wooden tower, or keep, stood on top. Below it was a fortified courtyard called a bailey, protected by timber palisades. Inside the bailey were barracks, workshops, storehouses, stables, and simple living quarters. A bridge connected the courtyard to the tower on the mound. From its summit, the Norman garrison could look across York and watch for signs of rebellion. The castle immediately became a symbol of occupation. It was not designed primarily as a comfortable royal residence. It was a military base created to enforce the authority of a new king. Resistance continued. During uprisings in 1068 and 1069, York became the centre of violent opposition to Norman rule. Rebels attacked the castle, and Danish forces arrived to support them. William responded with overwhelming force. The damaged fortifications were rebuilt, and another castle was constructed across the River Ouse, on the mound now known as Bale Hill. By the 1070s, Norman power in York had become more secure. The earth and timber castle was repaired, its defences strengthened, and daily life settled into a military routine. Guards watched from the wooden tower, craftsmen maintained weapons and buildings, horses filled the stables, and supplies arrived from the surrounding countryside. For much of the 12th century, York Castle remained largely a timber fortress, but the city around it continued to grow. Merchants traded along the rivers, craftsmen worked in crowded streets, and York became an important political and economic centre. A Jewish community became established in York during the later 12th century. Jewish families played an important role in trade and finance, but their position was dangerously insecure. They were officially protected by the crown, yet they were also subjected to prejudice, false accusations, and resentment from people who owed them money. After the coronation of Richard I in 1189, anti-Jewish violence spread through several English towns. Crusading propaganda, religious hatred, and disputes over debt created an increasingly dangerous atmosphere. In March 1190, a fire broke out in York. During the confusion, attackers broke into Jewish homes, stealing property and killing residents. Members of the community fled toward the royal castle, believing it offered the only place of safety. Approximately 150 men, women and children took refuge inside the wooden tower on the mound. For a short time, the royal keep became their sanctuary. But outside, an armed mob surrounded the castle. The people trapped inside faced an impossible situation. Contemporary accounts describe fear, arguments, and desperate decisions as the siege continued. The attackers promised safety to those who came out, but there was little reason to trust them. What followed was one of the darkest events in medieval English history. Many of those inside chose death rather than murder or forced conversion. The wooden tower was set alight, and those who survived and emerged were attacked. The exact sequence is difficult to reconstruct because the surviving accounts were written by Christian chroniclers and do not preserve the voices of the Jewish victims themselves. But the scale and significance of the tragedy are undeniable. The Jewish community of York was devastated, and the wooden predecessor of Clifford's tower was destroyed by fire. Today, the event is remembered not simply as another episode in the military history of a castle, but as an act of anti-Semitic persecution that must be treated with dignity and honesty. The burned tower was rebuilt in timber soon afterwards, and York Castle continued to serve the crown. During the early 13th century, various parts of the complex were repaired or reconstructed, but the fortress still depended heavily on wooden structures. By the 1240s, political conditions had changed. King Henry III faced the possibility of conflict with Scotland and wanted stronger royal defences in northern England. In 1245, officials were ordered to examine and strengthen York Castle. This began the transformation of the old Norman fortress into a much more impressive stone complex. Walls, gates, halls, kitchens, workshops and prison buildings were rebuilt or improved. The most remarkable addition was a new stone tower on top of the original Norman mound. The builders faced a major engineering challenge. The artificial mound had been formed from layers of soil deposited over generations. It was not solid bedrock. Every stone placed on top increased the pressure on the unstable earth beneath it. Magnesian limestone was quarried, cut into blocks, and transported to York. Masons shaped the stone using iron chisels and wooden mallets. Labourers hauled materials across the castle grounds, while wooden cranes and pulley systems lifted blocks toward the rising walls. The new tower had an extraordinary four-lobed design, resembling a four-leaf clover when viewed from above. Nothing exactly like it survives elsewhere in England. Its closest architectural relative may be the Tour Guinet at Étampes in France. Construction continued for years, probably from around 1245 until the reign of Edward I. The tower consisted of two principal levels, with thick stone walls, narrow openings, fireplaces, chambers, and internal staircases. A forebuilding protected the entrance and included a chapel. When completed, it looked very different from the open ruin visible today. It had floors, a roof, battlements, and a complex interior divided into rooms. The walls may have been whitened, making the royal tower shine above the city. But York Castle was rarely used as a permanent royal residence. Kings visiting York usually stayed elsewhere. Instead, the fortress became a powerful centre of government for northern England. Royal officials stored money and important documents inside the castle. At various times, it housed the treasury, the exchequer, and a royal mint. Coins were weighed, counted, and secured behind guarded doors. During periods of war with Scotland, the castle's strategic importance increased significantly. It also housed courts and a prison. Behind its walls, royal authority was not an abstract idea. It was experienced through taxation, judgment, confinement, and punishment. The wider castle was far larger than Clifford's tower. A stone curtain wall surrounded much of the bailey. Gatehouses controlled entry, while halls, kitchens, workshops, stores, stables, and administrative buildings filled the interior. Soldiers and servants moved through a crowded working complex. During the 14th and 15th centuries, however, the castle's military value gradually declined. Medieval warfare changed, buildings deteriorated, and the crown was often reluctant to spend enough money on repairs. Clifford's tower remained useful as a treasury, jail, and symbol of royal authority, but reports repeatedly described parts of the castle as damaged or neglected. Rain entered through failing roofs, timber floors weakened, and sections of masonry required constant attention. By the 16th century, some officials considered the old tower unnecessary. Parts were deliberately dismantled in 1596 and 1597. There was even an attempt to demolish it, but local opposition helped save the landmark. People already regarded the tower as an important feature of York's skyline. The fortress returned to military importance during the English Civil War. In 1642, conflict began between supporters of King Charles I and Parliament. York became a major royalist centre. Clifford's tower was repaired and strengthened. The forebuilding was largely reconstructed, gun positions were prepared, and a royalist garrison occupied the site. Medieval walls now stood in an age of muskets, artillery, and gunpowder. In 1644, parliamentary and Scottish forces surrounded York. The city endured a long siege, while soldiers guarded the castle and watched from the tower. After the royalist defeat at the Battle of Marston Moor, York surrendered. Clifford's tower survived the Civil War, but its days as a functioning fortress were almost over. In 1684, a catastrophic fire and explosion tore through the tower. Gunpowder and ammunition stored inside contributed to the destruction. The roof, floors, and much of the interior were consumed. When the smoke cleared, the tower had been reduced largely to the empty stone shell we recognize today. For centuries afterwards, it remained exposed to rain, frost, wind, and vegetation. But York Castle did not disappear. The site entered a new and often grim period of its history. A purpose-built debtors' prison opened within the castle complex in 1705. People who owed money could be imprisoned, even though they had committed no violent crime. They might remain confined until their debt was paid, forgiven, or otherwise resolved. Conditions depended heavily on wealth. Prisoners who could pay sometimes obtained better rooms, food, and treatment. Those without money endured overcrowding, disease, cold, and hunger. The castle prison also held people accused of serious crimes. One of its most famous inmates was the highwayman Dick Turpin, imprisoned in York before his execution in 1739. His later legend often romanticized his life, but the reality of crime and punishment in 18th century England was brutal. In 1780, a new prison building was constructed to expand the overcrowded jail. The castle area increasingly became a landscape of courtrooms, prison wings, walls, and exercise yards. The ruined medieval tower still stood above it all, disconnected from the daily machinery of